Hey everybody, welcome to CreativeLive. I'm McKenty. I'm the head of the music and audio channel here on CreativeLive. If you're new to CreativeLive, we're the world's leading online classroom for creative professionals. Here on the music channel, we've got classes on everything from songwriting to engineering, mixing, mastering, anything else that goes into the craft of making music. If you head up to creativelive.com/audio, you can poke around and find free previews of all our classes, so I encourage you to do that. After we're done with this, and what this is a Q&A session with Mike Metlay from Recording Magazine. The way this will work is that Mike and I are going to chat for a few minutes while you guys ask your questions. If you look over on the right-hand side of this page, there's a Ask widget, so you type "We Ask." Mike and I will chat for a little bit, allow some of those questions to come in, and then we'll spend the rest of the time answering those questions. So Mike, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hi, Finn. It's a real pleasure.
Well, tell us what you've been up to.
Well, recently, I got back from the Asheville Electro Music Festival in Asheville, North Carolina, about a month ago. Did a solo performance there. I'm currently working on a couple of albums that have been needing to come out for a while on my own net label. And, of course, here at the magazine, I'm busy as anything.
Yeah, well, tell me a little bit. I know I know about the magazine. I don't know a lot about your music. What can you tell us about that?
Well, I've been doing this for about 35 years. I got started in electronic music in the late 70s, and I've been doing everything from the sort of more ambient end of EDM all the way through to pure meditation ambient for a long time. I've played bass in a punk band. I've sung in rock bands. I've done the whole road warrior thing for a long time, but these days, you know, when you're as old as I am, it looks kind of silly for you to get out on the stage and sort of rock out with your beer belly.
Yeah, well, you know, that day comes for all of us. So one question I wanted to ask you is, you know, on the magazine side of things, what exactly does an editor do? I mean, I think that's a title that we've all heard a million times, but I don't know that everyone understands what on a day-to-day basis an editor does at a magazine like yours. Okay.
The important thing to realize about music magazines in general and recording in particular is that we try to divide our time between 2 or 3 different things that we think the readers need. We do interviews with, usually not with artists, usually with recording engineers or producers, people who have been involved in the actual music making process, in order to ask them their secrets or techniques on particular topics. The real problem we have is the balance is generally to try to get at least a good 10 reviews in every issue if we can manage it. These reviews are done by people who are studio professionals. They have a wide range of backgrounds. For instance, while I have at least a nodding familiarity with pretty much every DAW software out there, I would not write reviews on all of them. I would actually farm them out to people who use these DAWs professionally every day. So I have a Cubase guy. I have a Pro Tools guy. I actually have several Pro Tools guys. I have an Ableton Live guy. I have a PreSonus Studio One guy, a Motu Digital Performer guy, and so on.
Do you have a Bitwig guy yet?
Not yet.
All right, well, add that to your to-do list.
I certainly will. I have been interested in Bitwig ever since it launched. I've been keeping an eye on it. We actually usually don't do a lot with 1.0s, and I've been waiting for an update and for the feature set to settle down. Some of the initial questions that people had about things that they hoped Bitwig did but weren't quite there yet to get resolved. I don't think it's really fair to put a piece of equipment, whether hardware or software, up in front of the readership until it's polished. There is a certain advantage to the immediacy of, if you jump on board right now, this is what you're going to be missing. But what I'd rather do is to have a practical takeaway as to what you are going to be able to do with a project or a piece of equipment once you've got it in hand.
Yeah, well, another question on the magazine side of things is, you know, the people have been saying for many years, maybe even decades now, that print is dead. But, you know, a lot of those same people that say that get ecstatic when their product or brand or product gets some print coverage. So can you kind of give us your thoughts on the role of print these days?
Oh, absolutely. In the era of the internet, information comes to us really fast from all over the world. The primary problem with getting information on a technical subject like music production and music electronics is that while the internet is wide open and has YouTube videos and forums and God knows what all else for learning about this stuff, the vast majority of people who are posting this stuff don't know as much about what they're trying to teach you as they think they do. One of the things about magazines is that the process of doing the work, editing the work, talking to the people who are responsible for the work and vetting the work means that by the time you pick the magazine up on the newsstand or get it in your mailbox, what you've got is information you can trust. And the nice thing about magazines is that a good balance in a magazine gives you gear reviews, articles, instructional information, tutorials, interviews, and you have a month to kick back and read that information carefully before the next one comes out. There is a digital edition of Recording available that we're actually quite proud of. But we have noticed that especially in niches like professional development, photography, videography, music production, as well as hobbies like music collecting, music listening, or anything like food and wine, the niche magazines are still doing very, very well on the market. People want to pick them up. They want to read them. They want to look at the advertising. This is a very important point. When someone buys a magazine, they're not only reading the articles, but they're flipping through the ads to see what's new, what's exciting, what they should be putting their money into. Whereas, you know, everybody talks about pop-up blockers. So the digital side of things does have a way of getting the information out there, but you don't have a reliable, authoritative voice always, and you don't have a way of engaging your customers, your readers, on a multiple level combination of editorial enlightenment and what the market is doing right now.
Well, so, I know you come from the academic world, and it's kind of a similar sort of dynamic where if something, you know, if a study appears in an A-level journal, you know, that means something, and if it's in a C-level journal, it doesn't really mean quite so much. And I kind of think of print as the same thing. As you know, you guys are bombarded with a potential range of things you could cover, and
about
so
20 a day.
Yeah, sure, exactly. So if something makes it through your filter, or the filter of other magazines like yours, that means something about the legitimacy of that product. And by the same token, you know, print advertising isn't cheap. And so, you know, from the perspective of a consumer, I figure if somebody is willing and able to invest in print advertising, that says something about the legitimacy of their brand as a company. I mean, anybody can set up a Facebook page for their quote-unquote company in 5 minutes, but, you know, do you have the capital to invest in print advertising? It kind of puts you in a different class.
Well, that's true, but I should emphasize that we do not actually make a forcible link between advertising and editorial in our magazine. There are any number of companies out there where if you looked at their relationship with us over the years, you would see that sometimes they advertise, sometimes they don't. They come back, they go away. But the editorial coverage, if the products are good, is consistent. One of the things that we tend not to do, and I should cop to this, is that we have a limited number of pages every month. We want to focus on equipment that people are going to get, take home, use, and like. We want to teach them when it's good for them, when it might not be appropriate, but something else might be. The one thing you're not going to see is a lot of reality TV, we got this piece of equipment and it stinks, because by and large, we don't want to waste paper on something that people aren't going to use.
Right.
So people think that we're, you know, you're always biased toward positive reviews. Well, the fact is I don't want to waste space on negative reviews.
Well, we've got some user questions coming in, so let me get to some of those, and then we can go from there. So, first question we have is, how important is the quality of your interface for DAW, you know, home studio recording? If you're on a budget, should you prioritize getting a high-end interface, or can you get by with, say, the UR22 that comes with some Cubase bundles?
That's a very good question. In my opinion, interfaces should be purchased with an eye toward what you plan to do with them in the next 12 to 24 months, based on the number of inputs simultaneously that you're going to need and how you're going to listen to your output. If you're just getting started, there are a lot of really good companies making really good, relatively affordable two-channel in, two-channel out interfaces. Everything from Steinberg, whom you just mentioned with the UR22, which is a great little interface. We reviewed it, I guess, about a year ago. Companies like Focusrite with the Scarlett series. And Roland makes very good interfaces. Motu, we just did the Microbook 2, which is a really nice little interface. I've actually... the one that we reviewed last month is actually sitting here on the table next to me, waiting to go back. And there are new players in the field every day. Zoom is now making Thunderbolt interfaces or USB 3 interfaces, depending on whether you're running a Mac or a Windows machine or an iPad. And it just so happens that right behind me, this is the Audient ID 14. Which is a relatively new interface that's just come from Audient, which is a fairly well-known label in the UK, but is just getting known here in the States at the home studio and intermediate studio level. I haven't reviewed it yet, but you can look for a review in an upcoming issue. Basically, what I recommend is sound quality. You want to make sure that you can get all the inputs you want in. For instance, if you're just going to be singing and playing guitar, a two-input interface is going to be just fine. If you're going to be playing stereo keyboards and overdubbing a vocal, a two-input interface is fine. However, if you are doing a drum kit, then obviously you're going to need at least 4 inputs, kick, snare, overheads, and maybe as many as 8 or more if you want to do a full closed miking situation. So really what you want to do is to invest in preamps that sound good, converters that sound good, just enough flexibility so that you can monitor the way you need to and get signals in the way you need to. And then when you're ready to move up, either in terms of feature set quality or I/O, be prepared to do that in a time frame of a couple of years, because interfaces, while I'm still using some that are 10 years old and more, we are seeing advances in converters, and every year's crop is going to sound a tiny bit better than last year's.
Great answer. Another question is about output. So, you know, some people like mixing with headphones, some people like mixing with monitors. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, the single most important thing you can have in your studio is a way to hear your music reliably. If your music is not heard accurately and in a way that lets you make sensible decisions, then it really doesn't matter what else you own. So that's the reason why we devote at least 1 issue a year, if not 2, to the subject of acoustics, room treatment, and monitoring. Now, a lot of people say, look, I don't have a lot of money, I'm in a dorm room, or I have a baby sleeping in the bedroom next door. I can't use reference monitors, I have to work on headphones. I have to caution you, if you're going to do work and mixing on headphones, you need 2 things. You need to have a whole lot of experience with the headphones that you're using so that you have a good feel for how they sound, what they emphasize, what they overemphasize. Then you also have to be able to go to another room, a studio, somewhere to check your mixes on real speakers in a properly treated room. Headphones do not tell the whole story. I have a pair of headphones that I have been using for almost 20 years. I know them really, really well. But even I can get tripped up sometimes if I do a mix on the phones and then take it to a reference system that I trust. But by all means, do not skimp on monitoring. There's no excuse for it now. Even a small set of check monitors that you can fire up once in a while is going to be a huge help to you. These days, there are solutions from so many companies that are so affordable, there's no reason for you not to have good monitors.
Yeah, you know, one of the, I asked that same question of kind of my recording mentor years ago. was like, hey, I have these headphones, they're pretty nice, can I mix on them? And he said, well, yeah, you can, but they're going to make you focus too much on little things. And I didn't understand what he meant at the time, but it was exactly right. When I have the headphones on, I always get hung up on some little thing that, for some reason, when I listen to it on the monitors, doesn't seem like it's as big of a deal as it did on the headphones.
And the reason why that is because headphones are a very unnatural way to listen to music. Like right now, I've got these earbuds in. They are actually pumping audio directly into my auditory canals and vibrating my eardrums. The sound of your voice, the sound of my voice, is not mixing with the air, mixing in the room, and my left ear and my right ear are completely separated. That is really not a natural way to listen to sound. The way we localize, the way we figure out whether something is to our left or to our right, above us, below us, behind us, is because of the way the audio signals arrive at our ears and mix with them. When stuff comes out of speakers and interacts with the room, you're going to get a much more unified, more gelled sonic picture of your music than you do when you use headphones. Headphones, as you said, are great microscopes. If you're worried that the freebie plugin you picked up to do reverb is grainy on the tail end, you're going to hear it in headphones. But if you're talking about whether your kick drum and your bass are conflicting with each other, or whether you've left enough room in the mids for your lead vocal and your lead guitar, you need to listen on speakers.
So your latest issue is about DAWs, and I was wondering, how do you address kind of that topic in general without getting caught up in the dreaded DAW wars?
Very simple. I note that as the head of a magazine with a fairly large staff of contributors who have a wide variety of successful projects, I know people who use just about everything. I've got Pro Tools guys, I've got Reaper guys, I've got Cubase guys, Sonar guys. The point is, there are a lot of DAWs out there, and I'm not a big believer in DAW wars. I'm not a big believer in platform wars. In fact, when it comes to audio technology, I'm not a big believer in wars at all. The whole thing that I've noticed is, you can't see it in this setup of my camera, but I actually have a picture that I printed out from the internet on the wall. It's a picture taken from a farm somewhere, and it's a picture of a donkey leaning his head over a fence and braying at a little girl who's screaming at him. And the title is Internet Argument. Okay? People like to defend their purchases. They really do. They want to believe that they made a good choice. The fact is, a good choice for you does not by any means translate into a good choice for other people, and vice versa. What you need to look at in a DAW especially is, first of all, interoperability. If you are going to be taking your work from your studio to another studio, and you've got a reasonable idea of what those studios are using, that should inform your decision. Almost as important, and of primary importance if you're primarily going to be working on your own, is how the DAW feels and how it works with data. One of the things that people tend to assume when they see all these screenshots and their eyes glaze over is they assume that DAWs are all the same. Well, anybody who's moved from Pro Tools to Ableton Live can tell you that that's not so. Sure, you're going to see certain things that are always the same. You're going to get the piano roll audio waveforms. You're going to get MIDI notation. You're going to get the mixer window. But fundamentally, the way you work with the data, how it looks to you, how it works on your particular computer is going to make a huge difference to how you relate to your music, how efficiently you work, how quickly you can produce results, and then how easily you can refine those results.
So another thing I wanted to get your opinion on is internet education. You know, obviously here at CreativeLive we do things our way, so I'm hoping that your answer will involve some glowing praise for what we do. But you know, there's a lot of ways to learn how to make music. You know, you can learn from tutorials and forums. You can go to recording school. There's companies like CreativeLive. What are your thoughts on education as it pertains to music production?
Well, one of the things I like about CreativeLive in particular is that you guys actually do the same thing that we do, but for the internet rather than for print. You guys don't let just any Yahoo, well, aside from me, get on your cameras and talk to your audience. These people are vetted. They're professional. They can produce results. They can really show you ideas that make sense. Anybody can throw an instructional video up on YouTube, but to have the real ability to communicate knowledge that's useful, that isn't going to bite you, that takes production values. And I'm going to toot my own horn for a second here. We have a series of videos on the www.recordingmag.com website on recording guitar and bass. These are long, they're detailed, they show diagrams as well as close-ups of things like mic placement and settings. You can watch this video, listen to the narration, and when you walk away, you know more about how to record a bass, how to record a guitar, and how to get the tone that you want. It is possible for internet education to give you what you need and to be a good supplement, we think, to print. But the problem is there are a whole lot of people out there who think that they've got a duty to teach people what they know, and what they know is not necessarily as useful or as correct as you might wish.
Yeah, well, you know, I learned a lot from forums and from YouTube and stuff like that, but it took me literally years of sifting through a bunch of poorly articulated or just flat out wrong stuff to find those few gems. And so that's, you know, that stuff, as they say, is only free if your time is worthless. And
well, exactly.
You know, I'm a very important person, so my time comes at a premium.
Listen, we are all important.
See, I feel like I'm a little more important, though.
Oh, that's fine. Yeah, well, this is you, Finn. Of course you're more important.
Of course.
But the point is valid. People often don't realize that their time is money. Okay, let's say, just for example, that you've got a job and you've got a reasonable idea of how much money you make in a year, right? Your take-home pay. Take that number, divide it by 2,000. That's 40-hour weeks times 50 weeks a year, right? That gives you a very rough idea of what your employer is paying you per hour for your time. Now, if you love your music, especially if you're a professional at your music, is your time not worth at least that much, if not more? So if you spend hours and hours and hours trying to do something that could be fixed by spending a little more money, if you've cheaped out by $50 and you get an audio interface that doesn't give you proper low end, and you spend hours and hours trying to fix the bass in your mixes when the problem was you bought something cheap, then that's not a sensible economy. On the other hand, there is a tremendous value to sweat equity. If you learn this stuff, if you can use this stuff, especially if it's on timeless subjects, microphone choice, microphone placement, acoustics, room treatment, how to work with monitors, if you get that information into your head, it pays dividends down the road, because instead of fumbling around trying to solve problems, you have a mental toolbox to fix those problems.
You know, another thing you mentioned earlier that I wanted to pick up on is, you know, with interviews, you said that you primarily focus on producers, engineers, mixers, people like that, as opposed to artists. And one of the things I've noticed about this industry that's, at least from my perspective, kind of a shame is that aside from a few people that have a name, and I like to say being a famous you know, audio engineer is kind of like being a famous plumber. You know, still not really famous. You know, they can work with huge artists that get a ton of fame, but that shine doesn't usually translate to the production team behind it, which I always thought was kind of a shame. And that's part of what we try to do here, is like draw attention and champion those people that are behind the scenes. That, you know, certainly the performer, the artist is the centerpiece of that, but kind of champion those people that are behind the scenes. What are your thoughts on that? And is that kind of part of what you guys are trying to do with your interviews?
Well, the motto for everything I do as editor of recording, and I take very seriously, is that everything that appears in my magazine, including my editorial on the front page, should have a practical takeaway for the musician. I do not like wasting space on stuff that may look slick and fancy, but doesn't teach you anything. The problem with an interview is a lot of these people have the need to toot their own horn, or they're not really easily interviewable people. A lot of the best engineers out there right now are not articulate about how they work. One of the things we try to do when we do interviews, when possible, is we do them in person rather than on the phone or over the internet, because very often what will end up happening is the interview will be going along nicely and someone will ask about vocal treatment for this particular song, and the engineer will say, well, I just did this, and start turning knobs. And, you can then ask questions. Oh, so you set the ratio here and you have your threshold set here so that it catches this and lets this go. Right. And that way, when the person reads the interview, what they get is not, oh, engineer X recorded artist Y and isn't that great? He had $1 million studio. What they get is, when engineer X recorded artist Y, these are the settings he used because artist Y has this kind of voice and was trying for this kind of feel. And if I'm trying for that kind of feel with that kind of voice, this is a good place for me to start. It's a takeaway. And so when I do these interviews, they'll often be with people you might not have heard of, even if you're into the famous engineer, famous plumber thing. Yeah, we've interviewed some really great, awesome people who are well known, like Joe Ciccarelli, Elliot Shiner. But then, we have somebody like Chris Sonia of Dauntless Mastering, who is a mastering engineer who does really fine work and had great practical information for people who either wanted to master their own stuff or get their stuff in a good place for a mastering engineer. Just because you might not know him or anybody that he's worked with does not mean that we can't vet his information, learn what it can give you, bring it across, and have you, again, take it away and make use of it. So that's what I try to do with interviews, and that's why we don't tend to have a big fancy interview with a recording artist on every cover, because those interviews can be a lot of fun if you're into, look at my great big gear pile and this was fun here and there. But if you're trying for a takeaway, that's not a good use of my magazine. And so that really informs the interview process when we do these things.
All right, well, we are about out of time, but that's a great note to end things on. Head over to recordingmag.com if you want to learn more, and stay tuned for what I hope will be more conversations between us and Recording Magazine.
I'm really looking forward to it, Finn. This is the first, and I'm hoping there will be many more. Also, if you would like to write to me, I'm glad to hear from readers and potential readers alike. My email address is mike@recordingmag.com, and I hope you'll forgive me if I was a little stuttery this time. That half-second echo I've got in my ears from the monitors was a little hard to deal with. But we're looking forward to being able to do this again, and I want to thank you and everyone at CreativeLive for getting us out there. I really enjoyed going through the videos that you have up on your music site, the Joey Sturgis stuff, A.L. Levy, and a bunch of other people. It was a lot of fun, a lot of good stuff to learn. So check out CreativeLive if you haven't before, and check out Recording Mag if you haven't before.
Cool. Thanks a lot. We'll talk to you soon. Bye.
Thank you, Finn.